My name is Naomi, and at 28 years old, I never imagined I would be fighting for the home my grandparents left me. When my mum remarried last year, I welcomed her new husband Richard and his daughter Bella into our lives. I had no idea that beneath their friendly facades lurked people who would take advantage of my absence to claim what was rightfully mine. Before I dive into how my own family betrayed me while I was away on business, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt blindsided by the people who should have protected you. Growing up, it was always just my mum and me in our modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. My dad left when I was just 3 years old, and mum never really talked about him. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. During the day, she was a receptionist at a dental office, and in the evenings, she would wait tables at the local diner. Despite her exhausting schedule, she always made time to help me with homework and attend my school events. My maternal grandparents played a huge role in raising me. Every day after school, I would go to their house until Mum finished her day shift. Grandpa James would help me with my math homework, while Grandma Elaine taught me how to bake cookies and sew. Their house on Maple Street was my second home, filled with warmth and laughter. It was a beautiful craftsman-style house with a wraparound porch and a massive oak tree in the backyard. Grandpa had built a treehouse in that oak when my mum was little, and he maintained it so I could enjoy it too. Weekends at their place were magical. Grandma would make her famous blueberry pancakes on Saturday mornings, and Grandpa would take me fishing at the local lake on Sunday afternoons. During summer breaks, I would often stay with them for weeks at a time, while Mum picked up extra shifts to save for my college education. 3 years ago, both my grandparents passed away within months of each other. Grandpa went first from a heart attack, and Grandma followed shortly after. The doctors said it was heart failure, but I believe she died of heartbreak after losing her partner of 50 years. In their will, they left their house to me. At 25, I suddenly became a homeowner. The inheritance came with a stipulation that Mum could live there too if she wanted, but the property was legally mine. Mum decided to keep her apartment, saying the house held too many memories of her parents to live there full time. I understood and moved in alone, treasuring every corner of the home that held so many memories of my childhood. I redecorated some rooms but kept my grandparents' bedroom untouched, preserving their essence in the space they had shared for decades. After graduating with a degree in marketing, I landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in the city. Over 3 years, I worked my way up to become a marketing consultant, specializing in brand development for small businesses. My job required occasional travel to meet clients or attend conferences, but I loved the challenge and the opportunity to help businesses grow. After my grandparents passed away, Mum seemed to struggle with loneliness. She would visit me at the house more frequently, sometimes staying for dinner or weekend brunches. I could see the grief in her eyes whenever she looked at my grandparents' photos on the mantel. She was only 48, but the loss had aged her. The light that once sparkled in her eyes had dimmed. About a year ago, Mum called me sounding more excited than I had heard her in years. She had met someone at a community fundraiser. His name was Richard, a charming 52-year-old widower who worked as a financial advisor. They had connected over their shared experiences of loss. His wife had died from cancer 5 years earlier, and he was raising his teenage daughter Bella alone. When Mum brought Richard over for dinner at my house, I was cautiously optimistic. He was tall with salt and pepper hair and a warm smile. He brought me a houseplant as a gift and complimented my home with what seemed like genuine admiration. He asked thoughtful questions about my job and seemed interested in getting to know me. Mum looked happier than I had seen her since before my grandparents died. Bella came along for our second dinner. She was 17 with long dark hair and a reserved demeanor. She was polite but distant, spending most of the evening on her phone. I tried to engage her in conversation about school and her interests, but her responses were short and uninterested. I chalked it up to typical teenage behavior and being in an unfamiliar environment with new people. Over the next couple of months, Mum and Richard became inseparable. They went on weekend trips together, attended community events, and seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. Mum started spending more time at Richard's house than at her own apartment. She would call me with stories about their adventures and how well she and Bella were getting along. 6 months into their relationship, Mum called me with big news. Richard had proposed and she had said yes. The engagement seemed rushed to me. 6 months was not a long time to know someone before committing to marriage, especially when there were children involved, even adult ones like me, and nearly adult ones like Bella. But Mum sounded so happy, so full of life again. When I expressed my concerns about the speed of their relationship, she assured me that when you find the right person, you just know. I wanted to be supportive, so I threw them an engagement dinner at my house. Richard made a toast, thanking me for welcoming him into the family. Bella seemed more engaged this time, asking about my job and complimenting the dessert I had made. It felt like progress, like we could become a blended family that actually worked. Mum announced that the wedding would be in just 2 months. A small ceremony, nothing fancy, just family and close friends. I helped her shop for a dress and sent out invitations. Despite my reservations about the time frame, I was determined to support her happiness. After all she had sacrificed for me growing up, she deserved this second chance at love. The wedding took place at a charming local venue with just 30 guests in attendance. Mum looked radiant in a simple ivory dress, and Richard looked handsome in his grey suit. During the ceremony, I caught myself getting emotional, happy to see my mother finding love again after so many years alone. Bella served as her father's best woman, wearing a navy blue dress that complemented her dark hair. She seemed genuinely happy for her dad, which gave me hope for our future as a family. After the honeymoon, a week-long trip to a beachside resort, Mum and Richard returned glowing with newlywed bliss. During their first dinner back, they shared photos of sunset walks and seafood dinners. Bella scrolled through the pictures with what appeared to be genuine interest, occasionally commenting on how happy her dad looked. I felt optimistic about our blended family's future. A week after their return, Mum approached me with an unexpected request. She and Richard had been discussing living arrangements, and they wondered if they could stay at my house temporarily while they looked for a place of their own. Richard had been renting since selling his previous home, and his lease was ending in 2 weeks. It would just be for a month or 2, she assured me, until they found the perfect place to start their new life together. I had 2 spare bedrooms since moving into my grandparents' house. One was my home office, but the other was fully furnished as a guest room. After considering the request, I agreed. It was temporary after all, and I wanted to help them start their married life on the right foot. Plus, I thought having Bella around might be nice. Despite her initial aloofness, I still hoped to build a relationship with my new stepsister. They moved in the following weekend. Richard helped carry boxes complementing the house's solid construction and character. Bella seemed less enthusiastic, commenting that the house was cute but old-fashioned. I tried not to take offense, reminding myself that teenagers often lack tact. I had prepared the guest room with fresh linens and cleared some space in the bathroom for their toiletries. Mum hugged me, thanking me for my generosity. The first week of our new living arrangement went surprisingly well. We took turns cooking dinner, sharing the household chores, and even had a movie night, where we all laughed at the same comedy. Richard was neat and respectful of my space, always cleaning up after himself and complimenting my cooking. Mum seemed happier than ever, often humming as she moved around the kitchen. Bella initially kept to herself, spending most evenings in the guest room she shared with her dad and my mum, or texting friends. But gradually she began joining us for dinner and contributing to conversations. She even offered to help me clean up one evening, which felt like a breakthrough. I began to think that perhaps my concerns had been unfounded. But as the second week began, I noticed subtle changes. Bella started making passive-aggressive comments about the house. "This kitchen is so cramped," she would say while we prepared dinner. "My friend Amanda's house has an island and so much more counter space." Or, "These floors are so creaky. Don't they bother you at night?" At first I brushed off the comments as teenage complaining, but they became more frequent and pointed. Richard's behaviour subtly shifted too. During a conversation about property values in the neighbourhood, he casually mentioned how lucky I was to have inherited a house at my age. "Most people work their whole lives to own something like this," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You really lucked out with your grandparents' generosity." The comment stung. It wasn't like I had been sitting around waiting for my grandparents to die. I had loved them deeply, and the house was as much an emotional inheritance as a financial one. Moreover, I had been supporting myself since college, building my career through hard work and determination. The implication that I had somehow gotten an unfair advantage felt dismissive of my efforts. When I mentioned Richard's comment to Mum later, she immediately became defensive. "He didn't mean anything by it, Naomi. He was just making conversation. You are being too sensitive." This was new. Mum had always been my advocate, the person who understood me best. Now she was taking Richard's side without even considering how his words might have affected me. Similar incidents began to occur more frequently. Bella would make a snide remark about something in the house. Richard would add a subtle dig about my privileged position as a homeowner. and Mum would defend them both while dismissing my feelings. The dynamic was shifting in a way that made me increasingly uncomfortable in my own home. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner where Bella had complained about the ancient television in the living room, I pulled Mum aside for a private conversation. I gently asked her how the house hunting was going, reminding her that the arrangement was supposed to be temporary. "We've looked at a few places," she said vaguely, "but nothing feels right yet. Richard thinks the market is overpriced right now. We might wait a bit for things to cool down before making a decision." This was the first I had heard of any delay in their plans. "How long do you think you might need to stay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Mum shrugged. "I'm not sure, honey. Is there a problem? I thought you were enjoying having us here." I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I also needed to establish some boundaries. "I do enjoy seeing you more often, but I also value my independence. I had gotten used to living alone, and adjusting to a full house has been challenging." Mum's expression hardened slightly. "We're family, Naomi. Families support each other. Richard and Bella are adjusting too, you know. It hasn't been easy for them either." Before I could respond, Richard called from the living room asking if everything was okay. The conversation ended there with nothing resolved and a new tension hanging between us. A few days later, I came home from work earlier than usual and overheard Richard talking to Mum in the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, not intentionally eavesdropping, but caught by the mention of my name. "Naomi has this whole house to herself," Richard was saying. "It seems wasteful, don't you think? We could all live here comfortably, make this the family home it's meant to be." Mum's response was muffled, but I heard enough to understand that what had been presented as a temporary arrangement was being reconsidered as something more permanent. The realization sent a chill down my spine. This was my home, my sanctuary, the place where I felt closest to my grandparents. The thought of it being taken over, of losing my space and privacy, indefinitely filled me with dread. The next morning, I decided it was time for a direct conversation about their living situation. I found Mum alone in the kitchen drinking her morning coffee. I sat down across from her and took a deep breath. "Mum, we need to talk about the timeline for you, Richard and Bella finding your own place," I said firmly. "When you first asked to stay here, you said it would be for a month or two. It's been nearly 6 weeks now, and I haven't seen any progress on house hunting." Mum stirred her coffee slowly, avoiding my gaze. "Richard thinks the market will improve in a few months. It doesn't make sense to buy something now when prices are so inflated." "That may be true," I acknowledged. "But you could rent something in the meantime. This arrangement was supposed to be temporary, and I need to know when I can expect to have my space back." Mum finally looked up, her expression a mixture of hurt and defensiveness. "I thought you were happy having family around again. This house is too big for just one person anyway. Your grandparents would have wanted it filled with family." Before I could respond, Richard walked into the kitchen. He must have heard our conversation because he immediately adopted an apologetic tone. "Naomi, I'm sorry if you feel we've overstayed our welcome," he said, placing a hand on Mum's shoulder. "We certainly don't want to impose. It's just been so nice being here together as a family, and the housing market really is terrible right now." His words sounded reasonable, but something about his tone felt manipulative, as if he were trying to make me feel guilty for wanting my own home back. "I understand, sir, the market is challenging," I replied carefully, "but I agreed to a temporary arrangement. I need to know when you plan to move out." Richard nodded solemnly. "Of course, that's completely fair. We'll step up our search this weekend, I promise. In the meantime, is there anything we can do to make the living situation more comfortable for everyone?" The conversation ended with vague assurances, but no concrete timeline. I felt unsatisfied and manipulated, as if Richard had somehow managed to acknowledge my concerns while simultaneously dismissing them. Over the next few days, I began noticing more concerning behavior. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Bella in my bedroom looking through my jewelry box. When I asked what she was doing, she claimed she was looking for a pair of earrings Mum had said she could borrow. I had never given Mum permission to loan out my jewelry, especially pieces that had belonged to my grandmother. Another day, I found my favourite sweater in the laundry, stretched out and misshapen. Bella admitted she had worn it without asking because she thought I wouldn't mind. My personal care products in the bathroom were frequently used without permission, often left nearly empty. The most upsetting incident occurred when I discovered that a small porcelain figurine that had belonged to my grandmother was broken. It had been moved from the shelf where I kept it to the edge of the coffee table. When I asked about it, Bella claimed she had never touched it, despite being the only one home when it happened. These boundary violations extended to my work life as well. As a marketing consultant, I often prepared materials for client presentations at home. One morning before an important meeting, I found my carefully organized portfolio in complete disarray. Pages were out of order and some of my design samples were missing. When I confronted Bella, who had been in my home office the previous evening, looking for a stapler, she rolled her eyes and said I was being paranoid. The situation came to a head when I returned from a client meeting to find Bella wearing a necklace that had unmistakably belonged to my grandmother. It was a vintage pearl pendant with significant sentimental value, something I would never have given permission to borrow. "Take that off right now," I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. "That was my grandmother's, and you had no right to go through my things and take it." Bella's expression turned defiant. "Your mum said I could look at your jewelry. Stop being so uptight about everything. It's just a necklace." "It's not just a necklace," I shot back. "It's one of the few things I have left from my grandmother, and it's irreplaceable. You need to respect my belongings and my privacy." The argument escalated, with Bella raising her voice and accusing me of being selfish and unwelcoming. Richard rushed in, drawn by the commotion, and immediately took Bella's side. "What's going on here?" he demanded, placing a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. I explained about the necklace and the pattern of Bella using my things without permission. Instead of addressing his daughter's behavior, Richard turned the situation around on me. "Naomi, we're family now," he said in a condescending tone. "Family shares things. You seem very territorial about your possessions, which is concerning. Bella is just trying to bond with you, and you're pushing her away." I was stunned by his response. This isn't about being territorial. This is about basic respect for other people's belongings. Bella needs to ask before taking my things, especially items with sentimental value. Mum arrived home during this confrontation, and to my dismay sided with Richard and Bella. "Naomi, you're overreacting," she said dismissively. "It's just a necklace. Bella admires your style and wants to be close to you. Isn't that what you wanted?" I felt betrayed by Mum's response. This wasn't the woman who had taught me about respect and boundaries growing up. It was as if Richard had cast some sort of spell over her, making her blind to his and Bella's manipulative behavior. After this incident, I decided to protect my privacy by installing a lock on my bedroom door. When Richard noticed it, he made a comment about how trust is essential in a family home, making me feel like I was the unreasonable one. Mum looked hurt but said nothing to defend me. The atmosphere in the house became increasingly tense. I began spending more time at work or with friends to avoid the uncomfortable environment at home. Family dinners became rare, and when they did occur, conversation was strained and superficial. I felt like a stranger in my own home, walking on eggshells to avoid confrontation. One evening, I received an email from my boss about an upcoming business trip. A potential major client on the West Coast wanted to meet with our team, and as the lead consultant on the project, my presence was required. The trip would last 2 weeks, including travel time. Under normal circumstances, I would have been excited about the opportunity. Instead, I felt a nagging worry about leaving my home under the current circumstances. Preparing for the business trip required intense focus. This potential client could significantly expand our firm's portfolio, and I needed to develop a comprehensive marketing strategy tailored to their specific needs. I spent late nights at the office finalizing presentations and reviewing market research, partly to be thorough and partly to avoid the tension at home. The day before my departure, I sat down with Mum and Richard to establish clear guidelines for while I was away. "I'd appreciate if everyone would respect my privacy while I'm gone," I said firmly. "Please don't enter my bedroom or use my personal belongings." Richard smiled, that charming smile that now seemed fake to me. "Of course, Naomi. We completely understand. Your room is your sanctuary." Mum nodded in agreement. "Don't worry about anything here. Just focus on your work and landing that client." I looked directly at Bella, who was texting on her phone and barely paying attention. "Bella, that includes my jewelry and clothes. Please ask before using anything that belongs to me." She looked up from her phone with an eye roll. "Whatever. I have my own stuff anyway." Despite their assurances, I took precautions. I locked my most valuable and sentimental items in a small safe hidden in my closet, including grandmother's remaining jewelry and important documents related to the house. I also asked my next-door neighbor, Janet, to keep an eye on the house and let me know if she noticed anything unusual. The first few days of my trip went well professionally. The client meetings were productive and my presentations were well received. The company executives seemed impressed with my marketing strategy and asked thoughtful questions that indicated serious interest in working with our firm. On the 5th day of my trip, while preparing for a morning meeting in my hotel room, I received a text from Janet that made my stomach drop. Hi Naomi, not sure if it matters, but there was a moving truck outside your house yesterday. Lots of furniture going in. Everything okay? Moving truck, what furniture? I hadn't authorized any deliveries or changes to my home. I immediately tried calling Mum, but the call went to voicemail. I texted her asking about the moving truck, but received no immediate response. I tried Richard with the same result. Trying to stay calm, I rationalized that perhaps they were finally moving some of their stored belongings from a rental unit. Still, the lack of communication was concerning. I sent another text to Janet asking if she had seen anything else unusual. She replied quickly, "They've been bringing in furniture for 2 days now. Yesterday was mostly bedroom stuff. Today I saw what looked like living room furniture. This was beyond bringing in a few personal items. It sounded like they were furnishing the entire house." A sense of dread washed over me, but I had to push it aside temporarily. I had a critical presentation in 30 minutes and needed to focus. Throughout the day between meetings, I continued trying to reach Mum and Richard without success. By evening, I was genuinely worried. I called our family friend Sarah, who lived nearby, and asked if she could drive by the house to check if everything was okay. Sarah called back an hour later. "I drove by twice, Naomi. There are definitely people there. I saw Richard carrying in what looked like a new television. Your mum's car is in the driveway too." So they were physically fine, but ignoring my calls. The betrayal stung deeply. I sent a firm text to Mum. "I know you're there and getting new furniture. Please call me immediately to explain what's going on." While waiting for a response, I logged on to social media and checked Bella's profiles. What I saw made my blood run cold. She had posted several photos with captions like, "Home renovation time," and "New bedroom looking amazing." The photos showed rooms in my house being repainted and reorganized. One photo clearly showed my living room with all my furniture pushed to one side and new pieces being arranged. Another photo showed what was unmistakably my bedroom, but completely transformed. My bed was gone, replaced by a larger one with an ornate headboard I had never seen before. The walls were painted a different color, and all traces of my personal touch had been removed. I was in shock. How could they do this without my permission? This was my house, left to me by my grandparents. They had no right to make any changes, let alone completely redecorate and claim spaces for themselves. I tried calling Mum again, and this time she answered. Before I could speak, she said hurriedly, "Naomi, I know you're probably seeing Bella's posts. We wanted to surprise you with some updates to the house. We can talk about it when you get back." "Updates," I repeated, my voice rising. "Mum, you've completely taken over my bedroom without permission. How could you do this?" "It's not like that," she insisted. "We just thought the master bedroom was being wasted since it's so much larger than the guest room. Richard and I need more space as a married couple. We were going to set up the guest room nicely for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's my bedroom in my house. You had no right to make these decisions without talking to me first. "We'll discuss everything when you get back," she said, her tone suddenly firm. "I have to go now. Richard needs help with something." The call ended, leaving me stunned and angry. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept returning to the violation taking place in my home. I sent several more texts demanding explanations, but received only vague responses about family adjustments and making better use of the space. On the 9th day of my trip, I received a text from Mum that simply said, "We need to talk about the house situation when you get back." The house situation, as if my home, my inheritance was now up for discussion, I called immediately, but again reached voicemail. I left a message making it clear that any changes to my house required my explicit permission and that I expected everything to be returned to its original state before my return. The final days of my business trip were a blur of anxiety and anger. I managed to maintain my professional demeanor during meetings, even successfully securing the client contract. But inside, I was in turmoil. My family had betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way, invading my space and making decisions about my property without my consent. I decided to cut my trip short. After finalizing the necessary paperwork with the new client, I changed my flight to return home 2 days early. Whatever was happening at my house needed to be addressed immediately, face to face. The taxi ride from the airport to my house felt like the longest journey of my life. My stomach was in knots as we pulled onto my street. From the outside, the house looked the same, but a strange new mailbox had been installed bearing the names Thompson Anderson family, instead of just Anderson, my last name. Richard's last name was now prominently displayed on my property. I paid the driver and dragged my suitcase up the front walk. Using my key, I entered what should have been my sanctuary, but instead felt like a stranger's home. The entryway had been completely redecorated with a new console table and mirror, replacing the antique piece my grandfather had restored. Family photos that once adorned the walls had been replaced with generic artwork and photos of Richard and Bella. As I moved further into the house, the changes became more drastic. The living room furniture had been rearranged with my comfortable sofa and armchair pushed against one wall to make room for a massive leather sectional I had never seen before. The coffee table my grandfather had crafted by hand was nowhere to be seen. I heard voices from the kitchen and found Mum, Richard and Bella sitting around the table eating dinner. They looked up in surprise, clearly not expecting me for another 2 days. "Naomi," Mum exclaimed, standing quickly. "We weren't expecting you until Thursday." "Clearly," I said coldly, looking around at the transformed space. Even the kitchen had been altered with new bar stools at the counter and different curtains on the windows. "What have you done to my house?" Richard stood, assuming his placating tone. "Naomi, we should all sit down and have a calm discussion about the changes we've made. We think you'll agree they're improvements once you've had time to adjust." "Adjustments?" I repeated incredulously. "You've completely taken over my home without permission. Where are my things? Where's the furniture my grandparents left me?" Bella smirked from her seat at the table. "Some of it's in storage. The really old stuff was donated. Nobody wants those ancient pieces anyway." I felt like I'd been slapped. "You donated my grandparents' furniture. You had absolutely no right to do that." Mum approached me, hands outstretched in a placating gesture. "Honey, please calm down. We kept the important pieces. The rest was outdated and taking up space. We needed to make room for our blended family." "This isn't about making room," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "This is about respect and boundaries, both of which you've completely disregarded. This is my house left to me by my grandparents." Richard's expression changed, the mask of congeniality slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "Actually, Naomi, that's what we need to discuss. Your mother and I believe the house should be a family asset now. We've taken steps to transfer partial ownership to reflect our new family situation." I stared at him in disbelief, then turned to Mum. "What is he talking about?" Mum couldn't meet my eyes. "Richard thinks it makes sense for the house to belong to all of us as a family. I've signed some paperwork to begin the process of adding his name to the deed." The betrayal was so profound I felt physically ill. "You can't do that. The house was left specifically to me. You have no legal right to transfer ownership." "I'm your mother," she said, as if that explained everything. "And as your parent, I have certain rights regarding property that came from our family." I knew immediately that this was Richard's influence. Mum had never expressed any interest in claiming ownership of the house before he came into the picture. She had been perfectly content with the arrangement my grandparents had specified. "Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" I asked suddenly, realizing my bedroom had been completely taken over based on the photos I'd seen. Bella pointed toward the back of the house. "We set up the small guest room for you. It's cozy." I walked down the hallway to find that the smallest bedroom in the house, formerly my home office, had been converted into a cramped sleeping space. A twin bed barely fit alongside a small dresser. My desk, computer and work materials were nowhere to be seen. I returned to the kitchen, fury building with every step. "Where are my work materials? My computer, my client files?" Richard waved dismissively. "They're boxed up in the garage. You can sort through everything tomorrow." Looking around at these people who were supposed to be my family, I saw the truth clearly for the first time. Richard had orchestrated this entire situation, from the temporary move-in to the complete takeover of my home. My mother had been manipulated into betraying me, and Bella was enjoying watching my distress. "I want all of you out of my house," I said firmly. "Now." Richard laughed, actually laughed. "That's not how this works anymore, Naomi. This is our family home now. Your mother agrees that it makes the most sense for all of us to live here together. You're welcome to stay in your new room, or if you prefer, you can find your own place. Either way, things have changed." Mum at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Naomi, please try to understand. Richard has helped me see that this arrangement makes the most sense financially and emotionally for our family. The house is too big for just one person anyway." "So you waited until I was out of town on business to completely take over?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You planned this betrayal for the exact time when I couldn't stop you." "We knew you'd resist change," Richard said smoothly. "Sometimes it's easier to present a new situation as a fait accompli. You'll adjust, Naomi. Change is part of life." Bella had moved to lounge in the doorway of what had been my bedroom. Your old clothes are in boxes in the garage too. I kept a few things that looked good on me though. Hope you don't mind." Her smug expression made it clear she didn't care whether I minded or not. I walked through the house in a daze, taking inventory of everything that had been changed or removed. Family photos were missing. Heirlooms had been relocated or were simply gone. Even the living room rug hand, knotted by my great-grandmother, had been replaced by a modern area rug in colours that matched Richard's new leather sofa. When I went to check my grandmother's jewellery box, the one item I hadn't locked in the safe, I found it empty. "Where's the rest of my grandmother's jewellery?" I demanded. Mum looked confused. "I thought you took it with you. The jewellery box was empty when we moved it." I looked at Bella, who suddenly became very interested in her phone. I knew then that whatever hadn't been locked away was now either hidden among her possessions or already gone for good. The reality of my situation hit me fully. I was being pushed out of my own home by people who had systematically violated my trust and boundaries. They had taken advantage of my absence to stake their claim on my inheritance, and now expected me to either accept their terms or leave. "You have a choice," Richard said, his tone making it clear it wasn't really a choice at all. "You can adjust to the new arrangement or find somewhere else to live. Either way, this house is now part of our family assets." I looked at Mum, hoping to see some recognition of the wrong being done, some flicker of the woman who had raised me with values of honesty and respect. Instead, I saw someone who had chosen her new husband over her own daughter, someone willing to betray not only me but also the wishes of her parents who had left their home in my care. "I'll be staying with a friend tonight," I said finally. "Do not touch any more of my belongings. This isn't over." As I packed an overnight bag with what little I could find of my clothes, I heard Bella's laughter from my former bedroom. The sound followed me out the door into the cool evening air, a mocking reminder of how completely my life had been upended. I spent that night at my friend Alison's apartment pouring out the whole story through tears of anger and betrayal. Alison, who had known me since college, was outraged on my behalf. "You need to talk to a lawyer," she insisted. "They can't just take your house like that." The next morning, still reeling from the shock, I called in sick to work and began researching property lawyers. I found a well-reviewed attorney named Marcus Hamilton who specialised in estate disputes and property law. His office scheduled me for an emergency consultation that afternoon. Mr. Hamilton listened carefully as I explained the situation, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, he looked thoughtful. "Ms. Anderson, I have good news for you. Based on what you've told me, your mother has no legal authority to transfer ownership of property that was specifically left to you in your grandparents' will. Any paperwork she may have signed attempting to add Richard's name to the deed would be invalid without your signature as the legal owner." Relief washed over me quickly, followed by renewed anger at the deception. So they were trying to trick me. "It sounds like they were either misinformed about property law or deliberately attempting to intimidate you into conceding ownership rights," he replied. "Either way, the house is legally yours. However, we need to take immediate action to protect your interests." Mr. Hamilton helped me draft a formal legal notice requiring Richard, Mum and Bella to vacate my property within 30 days. He also advised me to document everything they had changed or removed from the house as evidence of their unauthorized actions. Over the next week, I stayed with Alison while gathering evidence and building my case. I took photographs of the alterations to my home, made lists of missing items, and collected social media posts from Bella that documented their takeover during my absence. Something about the calculated nature of their actions bothered me deeply. It seemed too coordinated, too confident, for people who should have known they had no legal right to claim my property. On a hunch, I hired a private investigator to look into Richard's background. What the investigator uncovered was disturbing. Richard Thompson had a pattern of similar behaviour in past relationships. He had married 2 other women before my mother, both recently widowed or divorced, with significant assets. In both cases, he had moved himself and Bella into their homes, gradually taking control of their finances and property. Both marriages had ended within 2 years, but not before Richard had secured significant financial gains through manipulative tactics and emotional abuse. The investigator also discovered that Richard's credentials as a financial advisor were questionable at best. He had been the subject of several complaints to regulatory authorities, though he had always managed to avoid formal charges. Armed with this information and the legal notice, I returned to the house accompanied by Mr. Hamilton and a police officer who had agreed to be present while the notice was served. The shock on Richard's face when he opened the door was almost satisfying. "Richard Thompson," Mr. Hamilton said formally, "I am representing Ms. Naomi Anderson, the legal owner of this property. We are here to serve you with a notice to vacate the premises within 30 days as required by law. Richard's confident facade cracked momentarily before he regained his composure. This is ridiculous. My wife has agreed to share ownership of the family home with me. You have no grounds for eviction. Actually, Mr. Hamilton replied, Mrs. Thompson has no legal authority to transfer ownership of this property, which was left specifically to Ms. Anderson in her grandparents' will. Any documents suggesting otherwise are invalid. Furthermore, we have evidence of unauthorized alterations to the property and removal of Miss Anderson's personal belongings without permission. The police officer stepped forward. Sir, this is a legal notice. I suggest you accept it and consult your own attorney regarding your options. Richard reluctantly took the document, his expression darkening. This isn't over, he muttered. Mum appeared in the hallway looking confused and frightened. Naomi, what's happening? Why is there a police officer here? I felt a pang of sadness seeing her so obviously manipulated by Richard. Mum, Richard has been lying to you. He has no legal right to this house and neither do you. It was left to me in grandparents' will and only I can transfer ownership. But Richard said, as my daughter, your inheritance is partially mine to manage. She said, her voice small. Mr. Hamilton gently explained, Mrs. Thompson, that's not how inheritance law works. Your parents specifically left the property to your daughter, not to you. You have no legal claim to it or authority to transfer ownership. As the realization dawned on Mum's face, Richard's demeanor changed completely. Gone was the charming, reasonable facade, replaced by cold anger. You ungrateful little brat, he spat at me. After everything your mother and I have done for you, this is how you repay us, by throwing us out on the street. The police officer stepped between us. Sir, I suggest you calm down. This is a legal matter that can be resolved through proper channels. Over the next few weeks, Richard attempted various tactics to fight the eviction. He hired a lawyer who made empty threats and filed frivolous objections. He tried to convince Mum to contest her parents' will, claiming it had unfairly bypassed her. When those approaches failed, he resorted to intimidation, leaving threatening voicemails and showing up at my workplace. Each threat only strengthened my resolve. I documented everything and reported the harassment to the police, adding restraining order requests to our legal proceedings. The evidence from the private investigator about Richard's past behavior proved invaluable in demonstrating his pattern of predatory actions. A month after serving the eviction notice, I arranged to meet Mum alone at a coffee shop. She looked tired and older, somehow. The sparkle that had returned during her early days with Richard, now completely extinguished. Mum, I need you to understand what's really happening, I said gently, sliding a folder across the table. These are reports about Richard's past. He's done this before to other women. He targets vulnerable people with assets, inserts himself into their lives, and takes control of their property. He's not who you thought he was. Mum initially refused to look at the documents defending Richard out of loyalty or perhaps fear. But as I patiently presented the evidence, including statements from his previous wives describing behaviour identical to what I had experienced, her resistance began to crumble. I thought he loved me, she finally whispered, tears streaming down her face. I thought we were building something together. I know, Mum, I said, reaching for her hand. He's very good at making people believe that, but this isn't love. Love doesn't take advantage. Love doesn't manipulate and isolate. By the end of our conversation, Mum agreed to move out of the house and into a short-term rental while she figured out her next steps. She wasn't ready to leave Richard yet, but a seed of doubt had been planted. The day before the final inspection of my house, scheduled for after their move-out deadline, I received a frantic call from my neighbour Janet. Naomi, you need to come quickly. That girl Bella is throwing things into a bonfire in your backyard. I rushed to the house with Mr. Hamilton and the police officer who had been helping with my case. When we arrived, we found Bella in the backyard with a fire burning in the stone fire pit. As we approached, I could see what she was burning: family photographs, my grandparents' letters to each other, and the memory books I had carefully preserved. Stop! I shouted, running toward the fire. Bella looked up, a malicious smile on her face as she deliberately dropped another handful of photos into the flames. The police officer quickly intervened, extinguishing the fire and detaining Bella, while Mr. Hamilton documented the destruction. In the house, we found more evidence of vindictive damage. Walls had been scratched, furniture deliberately broken, and insulting messages written in lipstick on my bedroom mirror. Richard arrived shortly after, feigning shock at his daughter's actions. I had no idea she would do something like this, he claimed, but the gleam in his eye told a different story. This was his final act of revenge for having his plans thwarted. The deliberate destruction added criminal vandalism charges to the legal proceedings. Bella, though still a minor at 17, faced juvenile court consequences for her actions. Richard's attempts to distance himself from the vandalism fell apart when text messages on Bella's phone revealed he had encouraged her behavior. When confronted with this evidence and the mounting legal consequences, Richard finally backed down. He and Bella moved out completely, taking only their personal belongings and leaving my house in shambles. Mum, seeing Richard's true colours, at last filed for an annulment citing fraud and misrepresentation. The process of reclaiming my home and rebuilding my life was long and painful. The physical damage to the house could be repaired, but the emotional wounds of betrayal cut deep. Much of my grandparents' furniture had indeed been sold or donated, and many irreplaceable family mementos were permanently lost in Bella's vindictive bonfire. For the first month after regaining possession of my house, I couldn't bring myself to stay there. The space felt violated, tainted by Richard and Bella's presence, and the painful memory of Mum's betrayal. I continued staying with friends while contractors removed the unwanted changes and repaired the damage. Eventually, I found a therapist who specialised in family trauma and betrayal. Dr. Kaplan helped me process my complicated feelings of anger, grief, and abandonment. "What you're experiencing is a profound breach of trust," she explained during one session. "The people who should have protected you instead took advantage of your generosity. It's natural to feel both angry and heartbroken." Through therapy, I began to understand that Mum's betrayal stemmed from her own vulnerability and grief. After losing her parents, she had been emotionally susceptible to Richard's manipulation. This understanding didn't excuse her actions, but helped me separate her betrayal from Richard's calculated predation. Slowly, I began rebuilding my home. I couldn't replace many of the lost heirlooms, but I could recreate the feeling of warmth and safety that had once permeated the house. I repainted walls, restored the original layout, and carefully placed the few preserved family photographs in new frames. My extended family rallied around me during this difficult time. My Aunt Elizabeth, Mum's sister, was particularly supportive. "James and Elaine would be so proud of how you fought for their home," she told me, referring to my grandparents. "They always said you had their spirit." Aunt Elizabeth also helped me reconnect with family history by sharing stories and photos I hadn't seen before. "Your grandmother was a fighter too," she said one afternoon as we sorted through old albums. When their first house was damaged in a flood, she personally supervised every aspect of the rebuilding. That's where you get your determination. 6 months after the legal battle ended, Mum reached out tentatively. She had filed for divorce from Richard and was living in a small apartment across town. Our first meeting was awkward and tearful, filled with her apologies and my cautious responses. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away or maybe ever," she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "But I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for betraying your trust and disrespecting your home." "Why did you believe him over me?" I asked the question that had haunted me for months. She looked down ashamed. "After your grandparents died, I felt so alone. Richard made me feel secure again, like I belonged somewhere. He was very good at making his ideas seem reasonable, at making me believe I deserved more than I had. By the time I realized what was happening, I was in too deep, too afraid of losing the security I thought I had found." Our relationship would take years to rebuild, but that honest conversation was a start. We agreed to weekly coffee meetings on neutral ground, slowly working through the damage done and finding a new foundation for our relationship. As for Richard and Bella, they moved to another state shortly after the divorce was finalized. I later heard through mutual acquaintances that Richard had already found another vulnerable woman to target. I considered warning her, but realized she likely wouldn't believe a stranger's warnings any more than Mum had heeded my initial concerns. Instead, I channeled my energy into creating resources for others who might find themselves in similar situations. I started a blog documenting my experience and sharing the legal steps that had helped me protect my property. The response was overwhelming, with many readers sharing similar stories of familial betrayal and property disputes. One of the most important lessons I learned through this ordeal was the value of establishing and maintaining clear boundaries. As Dr. Kaplan often reminded me, boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary for healthy relationships. People who truly love you will respect your boundaries. I also learned to trust my instincts. From the beginning, something about Richard had felt off, but I had dismissed those feelings in favor of supporting Mum's happiness. Now I understood that those intuitive warnings were valuable signals worth heeding. The house gradually became a sanctuary again. I created new traditions and memories within its walls, hosting friends for dinner parties, and eventually inviting Mum for carefully bounded visits. Each positive experience helped reclaim the space from the negative associations. 2 years after the ordeal, I met Mum for our weekly coffee. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her napkin before finally speaking. "I've been offered a job in Arizona," she said. "It's a fresh start away from the memories here, but I don't want to leave if it means losing you again." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Mum, our relationship isn't dependent on proximity anymore. We've built something stronger than that. If this is what you need, I support you." The relief in her eyes was palpable. "I'll visit often," she promised. "And maybe you could come out for holidays sometimes." "I'd like that," I said and meant it. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how far we had come. The betrayal had shattered our family, but from those pieces we had built something new. Not the same as before, but perhaps stronger in its own way, forged in the fire of difficult truths and painful growth. My house now truly felt like mine again. The rooms no longer echoed with painful memories, but instead contained the possibility of new beginnings. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by respect, love, and mutual support. Some family relationships could be rebuilt after betrayal, while others needed to be left behind for one's own well-being. Most importantly, I had learned that I could protect myself without becoming bitter or closed off. I could maintain healthy boundaries while still remaining open to genuine connection. And I could use my experience to help others navigate similar challenges. As I pulled into my driveway, I looked up at the house my grandparents had lovingly maintained for decades. They had left it to me not just as a physical shelter, but as a legacy of family values that couldn't be stolen or destroyed, even by those who should have honored them most. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who betrayed you? What boundaries did you establish to protect yourself while healing? Share your experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more reliable than the family we're born into.